The morning of the day she went missing, my best friend Hannah texted me that she had thrown up her last pill and needed more. She asked me to pick it up for her, because she's unable to drive without taking it. Everything was set up so I could do just that, since she always liked to plan ahead, unlike me, who dives in headfirst without thinking about what could lie ahead. I picked up her medication without any issues, but when I got to her house she didn't answer the door or my texts. I'm used to her being engrossed in her video games, so I had ended up calling her but she still didn't answer, which was a bit odd but not too out of pocket. Knowing she needed this medication, I decided to go to the garage and grab her spare key to let myself in. I made my way to her desk, and strangely, she wasn't there. It occurred to me that even though it was 2 p.m. she could be sleeping because she didn't have her pills to help her stay awake. Yes, 2 p.m. is morning for me. I have insomnia so I normally don't fall asleep until like 4 in the morning, and I sleep in until at least noon. It's why I took the night shift at my job. Anyways, I checked her room, and she wasn't sleeping, or anywhere to be found for that matter. Starting to worry, I called her again, only to hear my ringtone coming from her desk. This is when I really started freaking out. Hannah always has her phone, always. The only times she doesn't answer is if she's playing video games or sleeping, and even then she still answers most of the time. I tried to calm myself down, thinking maybe she had forgotten it and, since she couldn't drive, had gone on a walk. Who was I kidding? Part of the reason we were such good friends is because neither of us were athletic. There was no way she would just go on a walk. I immediately pulled myself together and began searching her entire house, thinking maybe she had fallen asleep in an odd spot, but she was nowhere to be found. I ended up calling the police, but they weren't helpful, saying she had probably just run off with a guy or something. That's one of the reasons I want out of this borough. I know Hannah, and she wouldn't just run off with a guy, at least not without telling me, and definitely not without her phone. That was 2 weeks ago. Everyone else who cares about her has given up, but I refuse to believe she was gone, well, until today. I decided this morning as a last-ditch effort, I would put aside my feeling of not wanting to invade her privacy, and use the access she had given me to her phone to look for something, anything, to help me find her. I did end up finding a clue to where she could be, but I know there's no way anyone I know could get there. In her Reddit, I saw a draft for nosleep. I wasn't surprised, because I knew she had liked writing stories, but this one was like 5x longer than any other story she had written. When I started reading it, I realized that it wasn't a story she made up, it was her life story. As I mentioned before, I have no way of reaching where she is, so I'm posting her story in hopes that there's someone out there who has had experiences similar to hers and can help me get my best friend back. My doctor told me I have narcolepsy, but that doesn't explain the other dimensions. I'm Hannah Zimmerman, 19F, and I love writing stories for this subreddit. You may have figured out this isn't normally how I write, but this is different, and I need that to be evident. I know a lot of stories in here are just that, stories, but what I'm about to tell you is quite real, and it's the story of me. In my junior year of high school, I remember having my first episode. I was in study hall, sneakily, playing on my phone, when all of a sudden I was in the woods, and running from something of my dreams, but this felt real. The pounding of my feet on the rubble of the forest floor, the tall grass tickling my legs, and the wind blowing around me as I fled. Then, I blinked, and I was back in study hall. My best friend, Amar, was looking at me, as I just blankly stared in their direction. They asked if I was alright, and I said I wasn't sure, and that I needed to text my mom. I told my mom that I had had a dream in the middle of study hall, but not a daydream. A dream that should have only happened if I was sleeping, and I was not sleeping. My mother was quick to express her concern, and asked me for more details. I couldn't really provide much, so she ended up telling me to keep her informed if anything like it were to happen again. After I finished my conversation with my mom, Amar, who had been not so patiently waiting, asked what this was all about. I didn't answer and instead asked what they had seen me do, to which they responded with, nothing. Apparently in the blink of an eye, I had gone from playing games on my phone, to looking like someone had stolen my pizza, confused and upset. Amar told me that nothing had happened or anything, I just suddenly looked distressed. Unfortunately, this episode of mine was not a random one-time event, and after the first one, they only increased in frequency. I no longer told my mother about these episodes, because I knew she couldn't help me and it would only worry her. I have had so many of these episodes now that I hardly remember any of them. One that I do remember, however, occurred in my German 3 class. I was in the midst of taking my chapter test, when I was suddenly a sheep, as well as all of my classmates. We were grazing in a field, and I could taste the grass, feel the wind through my wool, and hear the soft sounds of a lute played by a nearby sheep herder. Suddenly, I was back in class, sitting at my desk and staring at the test that hadn't even touched yet. It was around this time when my episodes began to turn into fluctuating waves of me traveling from my reality to somewhere else. Perhaps the strangest part about it was that people could barely tell my mind wasn't where it was meant to be. The only real way someone could tell was if they talked to me while it was happening, because I would say things that didn't make sense. Of course they made sense in whatever reality I was in, but not in my reality. I remember once when I woke up, my friend Juniper just stared at me agape and asked what I meant. I asked her what I had said and apparently it was, "No, you can't eat the bipedal dogtail." I don't remember what that reality was anymore because I've been to so many that it's honestly not that strange. I did eventually tell my mom it was getting worse, so I ended up going to the pulmonologist so they could figure out what was wrong with me. Unfortunately for me, Sinite had never seen anything like what I had. She said her only guess was narcolepsy because I was entering the dream state most likely, but she didn't know for sure and sent me to someone to test me for seizures. I went to this doctor and he scheduled me my test, but after I described my symptoms to him, he took away my license in the name of safety. I understand the safety aspect, but it really upset me because I talked to this doctor for not even 5 minutes and he completely changed my life to make it even worse. On the day of the test, they had a ridiculous amount of cords and I don't remember what kind of brain scan they were doing, but they cemented them all over my head so they would last all week. Yes, the test they were doing meant I had to be in a hospital bed with all these wires glued to my head for a week. I could only get up to use the bathroom, because standing up sends brain waves that would mess up their tests or something. Oh, and did I mention they had a live video camera in my room? Yeah, that was weird. The reason I was in the hospital for a week is because they wanted to catch one of my episodes on the brain scan thing, so they gave me this little button and told me to press it if I had one. This is a side note, but that cement stuff was okay at first, but on day 3 I was losing my mind. It was so itchy. Anyways, so after this whole test thing, they figured out only that I wasn't having seizures. Back to the pulmonologist, Sinite, we came up with a plan for the next test to see if I was narcoleptic. It took forever to get this test scheduled because our insurance was like, no, you don't need this test, it's not like what you're dealing with is making your life so much harder. After Dr. Sinite, my family, and other doctors calling the insurance company a lot, they finally let us do it under insurance, but we had to squeeze it in before our year reset and we had to meet the deductible again. We finally got the test scheduled for 2 days before our insurance year ended, and I had high hopes for this test. It all went well in the beginning, it wasn't uncomfortable and literally all I had to do was sleep. Apparently they were gonna wake me up periodically to make sure I didn't get as much REM as I needed, so that way when morning came and I just sat in the bed my body would be more prone to show evidence of narcolepsy if I had it. Oh, I forgot to mention, I had to be weaned off my depression and anxiety meds through a 2-week process before this test, and it was miserable. I'm talking almost constant suicidal thoughts combined with super high anxiety about anything and everything. Yes, it sounds ridiculous, and it was. I wasn't usually like that. My body just decided to freak out when I had to go off of it and made life as difficult as possible. It would have eventually leveled out, but I wasn't off long enough for that. Okay, back to the test. It was going well, and then the first time they woke me up they told me I had sleep apnea and they were sending me home. This confused me, and not just because I had just been woken up. I texted my mom to come and get me and she came in and basically interrogated this nurse. The gist of it was, I had stopped breathing during the night, which meant I had sleep apnea, and they had to treat that to make sure that wasn't the problem, even though I knew it wasn't. So yeah, after all that hard work I just was told I had sleep apnea, and that if I still had symptoms after treating that for a few months then they could do the narcolepsy test. This infuriated me and my mother. Yes, we understood that they couldn't properly diagnose me without my sleep apnea being treated, but we also knew that meant I would never be officially diagnosed with it. Why? Well, I had talked to my psychiatrist about how it was when I went off my medicine, and he said I should absolutely not do that again. Not going off the medication meant I couldn't take the test, which meant no diagnosis. Dr. Senite said she was 98% sure I had it, but she couldn't give me the official diagnosis without the test, but she could give me a prescription of something that would help me stay awake during the day without that diagnosis. Somehow that specific medication is also used for people with one of the conditions I have. I don't remember if it was anxiety, depression, or ADHD, but the point is I wouldn't get in trouble for taking it without that diagnosis. A few months before that unhelpful test, I was coerced into quitting my job. How and why? Well, when I started out on that job I was really good at it and really fast, but then I started struggling with my narcolepsy, which we had no idea what it was at the time, so my rate of work went down significantly. I felt awful about it, but there was literally nothing I could do. I tried my best to do my job, but I had to silently sit in a room and sort things, which meant 45-minute periods of me going in and out of my reality. I could hardly get things done, and even if I did get them done, almost nothing would be right because I would have done it while my mind was in another place. I did explain to them what was happening and that I was trying my best to figure it out with a team of doctors, and my supervisors were understanding and kind about it. Well, except for one, but we'll get to him in a minute. One fateful Saturday morning I went into work, and on Saturdays there are less people and only one supervisor. Lucky for me, it was the only supervisor who was a jerk to almost everyone. I didn't even think a thing of it because I normally just ignored him and did my job, but after I worked for like maybe an hour and a half he walked up to my desk and told me to follow him so we could have a chat. It was at this moment I knew I was screwed. We sat down in the break room, and I don't remember what all he said, but basically he told me I was doing worse than people who were just getting trained in and I needed to improve immediately or else I would have to leave. I'm embarrassed to admit, I did start crying. I started to explain about how I was trying my best but there was something unknown wrong with me, but he interrupted me and told me he knew about my medical stuff, but that I had had enough time to figure it out, less than a year by the way, and I need to just deal with it and do better. I told him that I couldn't, and I don't remember exactly what he said in response, but it was essentially quit or you will be fired. I said nothing, went to my desk and packed up my things, then went home. There's more that happened after that. But basically it just made my mental health worse because I felt like I couldn't do anything right and there was nothing could do about it. Fast forward to after I had been on this medication for a few months, and my life had significantly improved. My episodes decreased to maybe one a day if even, and I was able to drive and even hold a job where they actually understood and cared about me. Life was going good, probably too good now that I think about it. Ever since I've been on that medication I've felt like there was something in my head, upset with me for holding it back. I thought I was just being weird and anxious, but one day when I forgot to take my medicine, I had more episodes in one day than I'd ever had before, and unlike before, they were all about the same thing. I was in an absolute void of darkness, everything was black, I couldn't see or feel anything other than the cold abyss I was floating in. I could hear though, and that was the problem. That same voice I'd thought had just been something I was making up, was calling to me. Not like whispering and telling me to go to it, oh no. It was screaming unintelligible things, and every once in a while it would say, "Your mind is under my command. And, I've let you play long enough." After that day I have never forgotten to take my medication, but this morning something worse happened. I somehow didn't notice that I only had one pill left until a few minutes ago, and when I took it, it got stuck in my throat, which caused me to vomit it up. I don't know about other people, but I'm not keen on eating my toilet water-soaked vomit no matter how desperate. I just texted my best friend Amar to pick up some more medication from the pharmacy for me, since I can't drive without having taken my meds. They usually aren't awake at this hour, and there's no one else around to help me out, so I hope I'll be okay until they wake up. I just hope this voice in my head doesn't get any louder.